I did want to talk just briefly again, the idea that negotiation happens between people, because this kicks into our project, our team project is, well, we want to understand the culture of people because, the players on that team, the culture they're from, the education, the work background. One of the really fun or interesting parts is a lot of time in business nowadays, there's not one culture involved. I mean, I might have a work team where I've got my colleague in Taipei who is a natural Taiwanese citizen. I've got my colleague in Berlin who's German. I've got my colleague in Canada, and I've got myself, and the four of us are going to work together. Well, we come from four different cultures, and so it's not like I just have to read one culture or be ready to interact with one culture. I have to understand that each person's going to bring different components that are part of the influence their culture has on them. And one of the, Western Michigan University is what we sometimes, there's a joke in our university structure in the United States that we are a directional university because it says Western Michigan University. And then there's Eastern Michigan University, there's Northern Michigan University. There is no Southern Michigan University, but there's Central Michigan University. So there are these more regional universities often have a direction attached to them, east, west, north, south type thing. But who our students are is often, people from that region, more so than people from all over the world. So when I take students to Germany, for instance, I always say, look, you're going to find some things that feel different, but just remember, they're just different. They're not weird. They're not wrong. They're just different. And I do it in my typical kind of casual way with them. I'm like constantly reminding them, remember, it's not weird. It's just different. And if we appreciate that difference and work with that difference and take the advantages of those differences, we can actually work really well together. If we fight those differences in the sense of we get offended by them or we consider them weird or wrong, then those differences are probably going to destroy our ability to work well as a team. So again, just remember, negotiation happens between people. This is another one because this gets at something that most negotiators need to get better at, and that is we don't have all the information we want, so how do we fill those gaps? Well, we fill it with research and we fill it with conversation back and forth, questions and answer. So great negotiators bring that to the table, which, again, I want to go to. This is another game changer. Did you ask smart questions? So I had a guest in my class the one time, and I knew this person. I said, let's have a little fun. I want us to, in front of the students, I want us to ask questions of each other, but never actually answer them. Like keep pushing the conversation back to the other one. So, and we were doing a job offer example. And so the first question was, well, what are your salary expectations from the human resources person talking to the candidate? And my friend who was, she actually teaches now in our group. She's great. She's like, well, what is the typical range for the position? And I was like, well played. That was a good answer of my question with a question. And then I said, well, we have a pretty big range. What were you making at your previous firm? So now I pushed back, and we went back and forth about 8 or 9 questions, just pushing each other, never answering any of them, just to illustrate to the students. This connects back to being familiar with the other side of the table. When I asked her what were her salary expectations because she's in human resources, she understood that part of it was, well, most companies have a salary range for a position. So instead of answering the question, she asked what the salary range was. I'm like, well played. In other words, we have to be good with both questions and answers and really be thinking about it. Now, there are times I want to answer that question. Like you ask me something and I'm like, that's good. That supports my case. And so I want to answer it. So when we look at what are my answering options, I could just answer because that's good. I could bounce back and answer the question with a question. I could trade. I'm like, well, I do have some salary expectations, but I'd be interested to know what the salary range. If we both want to share that information, I'd be comfortable with that. In other words, I'll answer your question if you answer mine. I could avoid it and just, I've had people ask me questions, and I've just changed the topic without ever answering it to see if they'll push back and ask the question a second time. Most people won't. There are also times, and I've answered questions with people, it's like, that's not something I'm ready to share right now. So I can refuse. Now, there's always a little bit of information you share by refusing to share information, or at least there's assumptions people make. But again, a good negotiator has to recognize, and if we go back to the idea of what information is sacred and what information would I want to offer, well, some of that is, am I ready to ask the questions for the information I would like? And am I ready to either answer or defend when I don't want to share information? And so it all works together, but great negotiators are really question and answer masters. And just in a funny way, and this is what I would love to, if I were listening in on your negotiations for case one later today. One of the things I'm going to encourage you to do here as we get back and we give you some time to prepare is really think, what are the questions I should be asking the other side? And if I were the other side, what questions would I ask me? And be ready to answer those. And so when I teach my advanced sales class, we do a course within a course. So we take 2 weeks off of selling and we just cover negotiation. And I do almost this whole course in 2 weeks of class time, very fast, very high paced. But there are almost always some students that have taken the full negotiation course with me. So they're from my Germany program, or they took the actual full semester course. So when I assign who's going to negotiate with who, I always put the experienced people with other experienced people, because it's just not, in some ways it's not fair to take a person who took the whole negotiation class and assign them as the person negotiating against a first time rookie. And so, but it's fun to listen then, and you get the two new people, and when they get together, it's often statement, 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 statement. And the people with a little bit of experience, and they haven't negotiated world peace or major, multi-million-dollar deals. They've just taken one class, but they get together and they start by saying question, 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 question. And it's fun to hear that. I'm like, see, I influenced them to be thinking about, I would rather start the back and forth with more information. So instead of making the start of that back and forth statements, which doesn't help anyone gain more information, it simply restates existing information, I want to start with questions and answer and build a greater understanding. Then I'll be ready to speak. So, which gets to speak first or second. And, the general rule is second, because you want to find out what the other party is going to offer. But there are other times I don't even care what the other party wants to say. I'm going to say, here's my offer. And we call that anchoring, or that's the terminology that the Harvard negotiation process or folks use. I call the other side, I want to be in discover mode. I want to learn more before I speak. So again, probably 60% of the time you're going to speak second. That's the more common 40% first. Should I start big? Yes, because everyone gets tired. There's going to be a certain amount of tension and conflict. So don't get off track with issues that really don't matter. Now, there are exceptions. I've never negotiated with this person before, for instance, so that's where I get test the waters. So I just met Amy from CSKM today, so I don't really know her. And so maybe I'll negotiate a minor issue with her first, so that I can kind of get a gauge of her style and her approach. But, I know Lita from yesterday, and so we go way back a whole full day. So we're practically best friends now. And so I know her, and I don't need to test the waters. So let's negotiate the things that matter most. I'm obviously exaggerating that, but that's an idea. There is some conflict, and I want to negotiate a minor issue and do so really successfully, so that both parties feel a little less conflict and a little more cooperation, then get to the big one. So there are rational reasons to start small. But again, the general, as the word heuristics, the rule of thumb, meaning like when in doubt, this is what you should do, is to start big. Practice and rehearse. So sometimes my students are like, well, nobody does practice or role plays or rehearsals at the next level, especially in negotiation. I'm like, you have no idea how wrong that is. I've done consulting for companies that they spend 2-3 months rehearsing their role plays and practicing and trying things out. So we used to work with auto parts. The term that is often used is a tier 1 auto parts supplier, meaning they're selling things directly to the manufacturers, to the Toyotas, the Mazdas, the Fords, and now in the world, Tesla, etc. So they're direct, like you've got those manufacturers, you've got tier 1, then tier 2, then tier 3. We were working with a tier 1 distributor. They had a whole special room set up for their Toyota negotiation because Toyota's a really tough negotiating company. And so they spent 2 months role playing it. They actually had a team of employees that played Toyota, and they were supposed to like learn Toyota's techniques and basically get into character as Toyota, because they wanted to make sure when they got in the room with the Toyota representatives for real, it wasn't their first, like they had tried it and practiced it. So real companies do this. And so if you want to get good at this, if you want to get good at negotiation, practicing and rehearsing, and going back to the cottage story I told about buying the cottage in the big picture lecture, one of the key moments of that whole negotiation was just something I said to their real estate agent, which was, and the exact quote was, "We don't need a second home. Nobody needs a second home." And I was really trying to set the stage that we were willing to walk away from this deal. And in fact, we did walk away for quite a long time, leaving it in the other parties, as we would say often, leaving it in their court or leaving it on their side of the field, and it was their turn to go next. And I practiced that. I'm supposed to know what I'm doing when it comes to negotiation, right? I teach negotiation. I've studied negotiation. So why would I need to practice? Because I really wanted to make sure that moment of truth in our conversation happened exactly like I wanted it to. So I was actually in the basement walking, like kind of in my office in the basement, and I kept saying it and practicing it. And my wife was like, "Are you making the same phone call over and over again?" She didn't realize I hadn't actually called him yet. I was just getting ready for the phone call. And then she laughed at me and said, well, and then when I came back up, she's like, "How did it go?" And it's like, I nailed it. It really like made him be like, "Yes, I understand where you're coming from, and I'll talk to my clients." And I'm like, that's exactly what I wanted to hear. And I wanted to use the right words, and I wanted to deliver it the right way. So he felt that. And it took some practice figuring out the exact words, and it took some rehearsal, say them the way I want to say them. So again, don't think this is like practicing and rehearsing is only something we do in a class. Great negotiators practice and rehearse all the time. So again, the final thoughts go back to that think for best works best, etc. So again, whoever prepares best wins, which is you can insert those other words. Whoever thinks best wins, whoever works best wins, whoever plays with the team best wins. And those all are matter. And it was kind of fun to see one of my former students from 15 years ago and him using the exact quote, "Whoever prepares best wins." I'm like, yes, I won.